your language really impacts the way that you exist. So yeah, I want to be intentional with my language. I invite you to be intentional with your language. It was one of those light bulb moments in my life that got me to self-help, to discipline, to becoming an entrepreneur, to really crafting a life that I'm not only in love with, but also really proud of, which is nice. So language is this thing that we use all the time, even when we're thinking we're using language, right? So how we use language, how it uses us, and how we can become more intentional with our actions through language is what we're going to tackle today. And ultimately, we can change the trajectory of our lives. Pretty exciting stuff if you ask me. So I'm going to, kind of share a few examples with you to just really kind of get you into the feeling of what I'm trying to convey today. So we're going to look at an example where language was stripped, okay? So for those of you who've read the book 1984 by George Orwell, raise your hands. In that book, it was this completely fictional totalitarian state where they had this language called Newspeak, okay? So they were changing language as we know it. They had a whole new language called Newspeak. And in that language, the goal was to diminish the range of thought. Let's think about that for a second. It was designed to diminish the range of thought, okay? So when you look at these images, which is very much like they're covers of the book, different iterations and stuff of the book, it makes you feel like that kind of limited, kind of controlled, watched. And when you think about limited words, we are complex beings. And so when we don't have words to explain our emotional state or our, physical state or our aspirations, then we become limited individuals because we can't articulate all this complexity that happens inside us, right? And the crazy thing is you don't know what you don't know. So if I can't articulate my inner state, if I don't even have the vocabulary to articulate my inner state, well, that just limits the range of my existence, right? So knowing more words, having more experiences, and exposing yourself to different diversity of thought is really how you expand your possibility of what's in the realm for you, of what's even possible for you, right? Cool. Love that you guys are talking to each other. So another example for you, and this is kind of the opposite of 1984 George Orwell. It's when you have new words, okay? So I'm going to demonstrate the power of language here. And this story I heard from one of the Kielburger brothers when their group, like Me for We, when they went to South America, and their goal was to build schools, okay? And they were working with the local tribes there. And, the head of the school building committee, let's call them, they talked to the chief of the tribe, and they were like, hey, I have bad news for you. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to finish building the schools in time. So the chief of the tribe just whispered something to their right-hand person, and then that right-hand person got up on a rock and yelled the word Minga, okay? They go, Minga! And everyone starts to scatter and run away in different directions and go to the neighboring villages to call laborers and workforce to help finish the school. Guess what happened? They all finished the school on time. Crazy. So what does Minga mean? What was that one word that just brought people together? So the word Minga is not an English word, and it doesn't really have an exact translation, but essentially, to my knowledge, okay, you correct me if I'm wrong. So apparently the word Minga means drop your own self-interest and come together for the greater good. So it's inviting people to come together for the greater good. Leave your self-interest behind. Now, when you think about the power of language and how it shapes culture, how it shapes people, how it shapes possibilities, I'll use that word a lot today, so get used to it. you kind of see like, whoa, words are really powerful, right? Because when you think about like a North American culture, it's very self-interest motivated, right? We even get taught stuff like that in school. We learn about like people of power in school, whereas in Asian communities, and I can only speak to this because I've studied both in Asia and then also here in North America, it's like, well, it's very different. You learn about landscapes and you learn about, communities and you learn about culture. It's just very different, right? So this one word provided a new idea, a new opportunity for everyone to kind of come together. Pretty cool, right? So imagine growing up in that culture. You're a very different person versus growing up in a different culture, right? Fair? Okay, so what I'm basically trying to say is language shapes your thinking, okay? Now, I'm going to take the age-old stereotype that Asians are good at math, okay? So a lot of people say, well, is that genes? Like, how are they so good at math? Now, I'm here to propose the idea, could it just be? Well, no, I'm not the one proposing the idea. That was a bit self-fulfilled for me to say. I'm borrowing this idea from Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, where he proposed the idea, and he may have been the first one or not, and he said, well, could it just be language that shapes the way we think and why certain Asian kids are smarter than the rest of the globe at math? So let's take a look at language. Okay, let's take a look at mathematical language. So in English, after 10, you have to learn a whole bunch of new words like 11, 12, 13, 14. Well, guess what? Those words don't exist in Chinese, Korean, and Japanese languages, okay? What they learn is 10-1, 10-2, 10-3, 10-4. Way different and probably way easier. So let's take an example, okay? So 12 would be 10-2, fair. And now let's try to do some math, okay? 47 plus 32, go. How would you do it? I would do 7 plus 2, 9, and then I'd do 40 plus 30, which is 70, so 70 plus 9 is 79, okay? Now here's how someone who learned numbers in China, Japan, or Korea would do it. 4 10s 7 plus 3 10s 2. 4 plus 3, 7. 7 plus 2, 9. 7 10s 9. Okay? So it's 3 steps versus 2 steps. And for us, it's like, well, is that really that different? It is. Because a 4-year-old Chinese kid can count on average to 40. Whereas a 4-year-old American kid can count on average to 15. 15 versus 40. Now, by the time the American kid gets to 40, they're about 5 years old. So they're already a whole year behind in fundamental math, okay? So when we ask questions like, why is this the way that it is? Maybe it's language, right? Why are you the way that you are? Maybe it's language, okay? And I know that that can feel like kind of an easy fix, but I promise you it's not. If you have ever tried to change your language, you know this to be true. It is the hardest thing to do. We are just creatures of habit, okay? Most of our thoughts are actually reactive. And a lot of people will be like, I feel like I'm stuck. I'm stuck in a routine. I feel like I can't get out. I feel like I'm living the same moments over and over again. And that's because, well, we really are, right? 50 to 90% of what we do in our average day is autopilot. So naturally the language, the things that we're thinking, the things that we're saying, autopilot. All right, change my language, change my life. Well, how do I do it? This is how, okay? So it starts with your beliefs, okay? Everything around what we say and what we think is what we believe, right? It's like, I can do this, I can't do this. The world is hard, the world is tough, right? Those are your beliefs. And that belief influences the potential of something to exist in reality, okay? So if I say, I am a dancer, well, now I've given myself this possibility of being a dancer. The potential exists. I can be a dancer because I believe that I am. And that influences your actions, okay? So then you're actually going to act as though you are a dancer, and that could be that you start doing some dance in your free time, you start watching and learning, you start practicing some beats, right? And those actions are then going to influence your results. You maybe perform in a competition, you get an award. Now you are a dancer because those results are going back and feeding into your beliefs, okay? So this is the classic formula for a virtuous loop or a vicious loop, okay? In that way, you choose, my friend. That's what's so exciting about this, right? What are your beliefs about yourself? What are your beliefs about the world? Well, guess what? That is influencing the potential of your existence. I feel like I just need a moment to take that in, that is such a heavy reminder that it's always down to what you believe. Now, of course, there are, global beliefs, right? There are community-wide beliefs. There are systemic beliefs. So in order to change those sort of things, you need more people to believe different things, and therefore change can happen. But that's why change takes time, because all of these beliefs, and when you kind of study what makes humans different from all these other animals, even though we don't really know what's going on in their brains, we can say humans have this very interesting thing called a sense of self, right? We have an identity. This is who I am, right? I am a go-getter, or I am a hustler, or I am a soft-spoken individual, right? Whatever it is that you believe, that is a part of your identity. So what identity statements are you thinking, are you using in your day-to-day life? That is the one piece of, takeaway homework that you have if you really do want to change your language, change your life. Think about those identity statements. What are you saying? And I'll give you an example. I used to go around very loudly. I'm kind of a loud, passionate person. I would go around saying hey, I'm not a runner. It's not for me. My body doesn't work that way. I'm just not a runner. I can't do it. And I got into some arguments kind of being well, have you really given it a shot? Are you sure? Everyone can run, man. We're made to run. Our bodies are made to move. And I was just not mine, man. Not mine, right? So I had these very deeply rooted identity statements that I am not a runner. Now, for those of you who watch my YouTube videos, you know that I run, right? And that's because one day I was you know what? I can run if I try. I probably could. I just haven't tried hard enough, right? So the truth is, it's you're making something an identity statement, but the reality is you don't really want to, right? You don't want to change. So this stream, this video, is not for you if you don't want change. If you don't want change, I think you could be all right, peace out, man. This is only if you don't like the way that your life is going. You don't like the way that your days are unfolding. There are things you want to change about it. Look at your language, okay? Here's one example that really blew my mind. We got Kaden in the house. What's up? Hello, Kaden. So this one person saw another person in a wheelchair, and person one asked the person in wheelchair, how do you see yourself? Aren't you confined by your wheelchair? Don't you feel confined? And the person in the wheelchair replied, I'm not confined. I'm liberated by it. If it wasn't for my wheelchair, I would be bedbound and never be able to leave my house. Very powerful word choice, right? Goes from confined to liberated. That shift in perspective completely transformed how he lived every single day, right? So if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling lost, if you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling tired, what can you do about your language and the way that you see your environment to kind of shift the mood a bit, shake it up a bit, okay? Because your environment actually plays a huge role in shaping how you feel, in shaping your habits, because a lot of it is kind of like wallpaper, but we have relationships with objects, okay? We have relationships with our phone. We have relationships with our running shoes. We have relationships with our devices, with our food, okay? So what are those relationships, and how can you reword them? Like the guy in the wheelchair is an object, but that object took him from confined to liberated, right? If I say my phone is my lifeline, well then guess what? I'm probably going to be on my phone quite a bit because it's my lifeline. But instead I could be like, well, my heart is my lifeline and my phone is just a tool. Probably gonna use my phone less if I articulate my relationship with my phone like that, right? If you have a smoking habit that you want to break, a coffee habit, a drinking habit, how do you articulate your relationship with that thing? Fair? Okay. Now, who's heard of the mind-body connection? Probably you've heard of it. It's pretty common. You'll see it around. Well, there's a lot of studies around it, and I'm pretty fascinated by it. Because what it's telling us is that it's not just a one-way street where our mind tells our body what to do. Our body can also tell our mind what to do. So if you're finding the activity really challenging of trying to change your language in order to change your life, think about it from the point of view of your physiology. How can you change your body language, another type of language, to then change your mind language? Okay? So let's try this. Ready for another fun exercise? So this is sadness. Hello, sadness. If you've watched the movie, what was it? What was the Inside Out, right? If you watch the movie Inside Out, there you go. You know sadness. So I would love for you to say out loud and kind of embody the physiology of sadness. I want you to say, I feel sad. Okay, so let's try it. I feel sad. How do you feel? Well, I feel sad. I actually feel sad. I actually feel like my energy just kind of depleted a little bit. So now we're going to try to infuse a little injection back. Let's pretend to be Homer Simpson, okay? Literally the color of yellow. If we can embody the color of yellow and however you describe Homer in your mind. And I want you to take that body language that he's showing here, right? And say out loud, I feel energized. That's what I want you to try right now with me. You ready? 3, 2, 1. I feel energized. How do you feel? Probably very different, right? Very different from this to this, okay? So our physiology, when we smile, it actually sends signals that, hey, your smile muscles are turned on. Okay, you must be kind of happy. It's like, oh man, your shoulders are shrugging. This person's probably feeling kind of sad, right? So remember that word identity? Your emotions are also a part of your identity. If you're just like the sarcastic, harsh one, I don't know who is that, but if that's you, then you might be proud of that identity. You might be like, hey, people respect that. I'm respected. So again, if you want it to change, you can think about changing your body language in order to then embody the emotions that you actually want to feel, okay? Now, that's not to say that negative or undesired emotions are a no-no and never feel it, right? Because that's toxic positivity. That's like, oh yeah, let's be positive all the time. That's not really possible. Well, I haven't tried it, so I don't know. But what you could do is feel the feeling and then decide if you want to stay in that feeling. And this is a quote that I heard from Leslie Knope from Parks and Rec, where she said, failure is not when you fall down. It's when you stay down. Similarly, if you have an undesired emotion, you're not an angry person just because you feel angry, but you are an angry person if you stay angry. Fair? Feel the feeling, decide how to process it, and then transform that feeling through your body language or through your actual language. Totally up to you. Okay? Then we've got this beautiful thing called the mind's eye, right? The mind's eye, how would you describe it? To me, it's like the visual projector in your brain. That's how I would think about the mind's eye. And when you combine language with your mind's eye, that's a really powerful tool. Because now we get to things like visualization with words, okay? Not just with images, but also with words. So sometimes we might use language to fit in, right? So when I lived in Montreal, there was this, so Montreal, for those of you who may not know, is a city in Quebec, which is a province in Canada, and they speak French predominantly, okay? So the rest of Canada will, mostly speak English. There's still some parts that speak French, but they speak French quite a bit. And so when I was working there, I overheard this word that was used quite a bit colloquially, and it was désastre, okay? Anything that went wrong, even if it was just a joke, even if you like stubbed your toe, people would just say, désastre. And it would just be like a funny thing that people say, okay? So I noticed myself saying disaster. Now, when I think of disaster and I kind of visualize something in my mind's eye, that to me is like, whoa, everything's falling apart. It's the worst possible thing that could happen. And so even though you're just joking around, you're using very powerful language that's like, ooh, it's doomsday. It's a disaster. So what images are you feeding your brain, right? We say a lot of things like slang and colloquially that we may not truly understand the impact of. I saw this like TikTok/Reels audio that went, the songs you sing out loud actually manifest. And you know what? It might actually be true. It might actually be true. There's just not enough data yet, but they're doing a whole bunch of studies around psychoneuroimmunology where they're actually looking at your psychology, your neural connection, and then how all of that kind of connects. So language plays a huge role in that, right? Now, if you actually do have a TV in your brain, when we think in visual images. Some of us think in sounds, especially when we're like worried and stuff, but most of us think in visual images. So if I tell you, hey, don't think of a tiger head on a human body, what did you just do? Your mind is so good at visualizing that. If I say, don't eat too much sugar, what do you see in your head? You see too much sugar, because we don't really understand the don't part of it. That negative language is very difficult for our brain. I wouldn't say very difficult, I will say challenging for our brain to comprehend. When we give it a simple suggestion like, eat sugar, that's what it's thinking, right? Don't eat too much sugar. I have a pile of sugar in my brain. That's what I'm thinking of. Don't forget to buy the carrot. I see a carrot in my brain. Okay, that might work. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't buy this. Don't eat that. Don't talk to this person. So we're telling ourselves what not to do instead of telling ourselves what to do. When you tell yourself what not to do, you don't actually give yourself an alternative route. You're kind of like, hey, don't do that. Okay, well then should I just stand still? Like, what should I do instead? Give yourself that offer, that possibility, okay? So take all of your, negatively worded language. And by negative here, I mean in the sense of the sentence structure, not in the sense of emotion, okay? So instead of don't, you want to change to do. So tell yourself what to do, and that'll create that visual in your mind's eye. Cool? Ooh, Malone, I see what you're saying there. I get it now. Thank you so much. That's so nice of you. So, what did we learn? Be intentional with the visuals you feed your mind's eye, because that is also language. That's your brain's language. And then positive language is more impactful than negative language. And to be very clear, this is positive language based on just like sentence structure. Okay, let's take some examples, okay, to make this concrete. I wish I didn't speak negatively about myself. How would you say that positively? I speak positively about myself. Okay, simple. That was a simple switch. Not everything is as simple as that. I'm not working hard enough. Now here, you can't just do a simple switch. You can't say, well, I am working hard enough, because that could literally be a lie, right? And your brain doesn't like lies. It doesn't like deception. So what can you say that is a positive sentence, but it gives you that, possibility of like, okay, I can do more, right? So for me, that's like, I'm made for more. I'm not working hard enough to I'm made for more, okay? That's my solution on how to code it internally. Hopefully that makes some sense. Hey, we got Biohacking Palace in the house. Hello, I'm so glad you liked the breath video. Thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate that. So here's some cheat codes. You ready, Freddie? Either write it down or take a photo at the end, or come back to this video because it'll be saved. I'm not to I am. I'm not a fighter. I am a lover. I can't to I can. Okay, now this isn't just a simple switch again, right? So you can't just say, I can't juggle, and then you switch it to being like, I can juggle. Well, again, if you can't, you can't. So it's more about, I can't juggle to, I can juggle if I practice, or I can't dance, but I can hold a beat, right? So you're giving yourself an offer for possibility. I can't feels depleting. Whereas I can feels empowering, right? What can you do? Focus on that. Be intentional about that instead of focusing on what you can't do. Because obviously you can do anything if you practice, right? Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to say that as a full sentence. There's no subtext on, not subtext, what is that called? What is that called when you have like lines at the end of a page? Footnotes? There's no footnotes to that. I try to I will. I should to I must. Okay? So I try and I should is kind of seen as weaker language with your brain. Your brain loves to find loopholes. And I say this as like your brain, our brains love to find loopholes. It's like, yeah, I'll try to do my best. I will do my best. Okay? That's a very different standard now. We got to live up to another standard. I should do that thing. It's like, well, should I or shouldn't I? You know, it's still kind of open for debate. Whereas I must do that thing. Oh, there's a final kind of feeling to that, you know? I must do this. So hopefully that's helping you, and hopefully that makes you feel like you have some tools that are right here, right now, for free, right? You don't have to go, and spend lots of money and try to psychoanalyze yourself and others to figure out what's going on with you deep down inside. It's more about like, okay, because I'm very action oriented, if you haven't noticed. So I like to be like, hey, this is a plan. This makes sense. Language is something we use all the time. So how can I use language to rewire my brain chemistry? Like, I just realized I can't swear, but holy fudge balls, that's amazing, right? So changing your language is rewiring your brain. You have the power to do that today, right here, right now, for free, forever, for life. Damn, that's what I'm talking about. So, neurons that fire together, wire together. These beautiful things that we have in our brains, they're just taking the familiar route, the familiar path, because they've taken it many times before. 50 to 90% of our days are in autopilot. But if you start to create those new connections, those new physiological responses, well, those neurons are going to wire together. And the more you practice it, the stronger they're going to become. And that's exactly what this whole thing was about. It was about being intentional about our language and bringing attention to that very basic, fundamental part of our lives to then change the trajectory of our lives. Pretty cool.